Hey guys, so I got my hands on an A6000. My buddy Mike lent me his A6000, and I'm gonna be comparing it with the A6300, and I'm gonna do some test samples in 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second 1080p. I've been hearing a lot of word on the street that the A6000 actually has better 1080p video, so I want to put that to the test and see if that's true. We'll test out the autofocus on both these cameras. The autofocus on the A6000 is actually awesome, and it's much improved on the A6300, but it's not necessary. And if you aren't doing 4K video, then maybe the A6000 is the camera for you. So let's go out and do some test samples of video and see how they stack up. Toronto, nice day. So starting out with the A6300 at 60 frames per second, 1080p, you can watch the crops here. Honestly guys, there's not a huge difference between the A6000 and the A6300. A lot of you are gonna say that it's better, but it's really only just a little bit sharper. Watch the crops here side by side. You can see that the A6300 has a bit more sharpness. All right, so let's go to a shot that's a little bit further away with a telephoto lens. In this test, you can actually see quite a bit of a difference in detail though. If you look at the top right corner, there's a lot more detail there on the A6000. Doing shots like this, there's a lot of detail, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's good to see what it looks like cropped in, but like I was saying, unless you're gonna be zooming to 350%, which you won't because it looks terrible, there's really not much difference between the two. Obviously a little bit more sharpness on the A6000. I don't know if that's because it's inside the camera or what. All right, so aside from both of these cameras looking almost identical, the win is going to the A6300. It obviously has the magnesium alloy, weather-sealed body, and it has this new AEL switch on the back. And to be honest, I feel like the switches and buttons on the back of the A6300 feel a lot more solid. It could be because of the weather sealing. They might have some kind of like rubber behind them. They just feel more stiff, and they don't feel as cheap as on the A6000. All right, so autofocus and video on the A6000 is actually really awesome. I got this camera back in 2014, I think, when it came out in the summer, and I shot a ton of videos with it. I shot this music video up here. It was all done with autofocus, believe it or not. It actually looks very cinematic, and that's something that's really great with this camera. You can set the autofocus speeds. It's something you can do on the A6300 as well, and its autofocus is just as awesome. So both these cameras in autofocus and video is really great. Let's do some tests with some face detect autofocus and see how well it tracks. I thought it'd be a good test to show autofocus and video in a really busy environment. And as you can see, the A6300 does a really good job here. It doesn't go all crazy and hunting all over the place. And the same can be said for the A6000 actually. It tracked really nicely in here. So when it comes to autofocus and video, I'd say the A6000 is probably just as good as the A6300. Tracks focus nice, it's got a nice smooth transition between focus points, and it feels pretty natural. It almost looks like you're doing it manually. And that's something I really loved about the A6000, and it's awesome that it's still on the A6300, with the only difference being you can do it in 4K on the A6300. So if you need a 1080p camera with awesome autofocus, the A6000 is still a good choice.